Not a single person from my family showed up to my wedding, not even my parents nor my best friend. They all went to my sister's engagement party instead. But as we poured the champagne, my phone lit up with a message from my mom. "We need to talk." Immediately. Followed by 35 missed calls. "Hi, my name is Olivia Carter. I am 28 years old, living in Boston, and working as a project manager in the tech industry. I once believed that my wedding day would be the happiest moment of my life, the day when all the years of effort, waiting, and trust in love would finally bear fruit. But reality turned out to be harsher than I ever imagined. The row reserved for my family at the ceremony remained empty, so cold and silent that I nearly dropped the bouquet from my hands. My parents were not there, my sister Chloe was not there, and neither was Emily, my best friend from college, who had once promised to be my bridesmaid and hold my hand as I walked down the aisle. I could hardly believe it, yet the truth was right in front of me. They had chosen not to stand by me on the most important day of my life. What cut even deeper was the reason for their absence. Every single one of them, from my parents to my sister and even my best friend, had gone together to attend Chloe's engagement party on the very same day as my wedding, even though I had sent out my invitations 10 months earlier. When I chose the date, I even asked my mother's opinion to avoid any family conflicts, and she simply nodded, assuring me she would make arrangements. Yet, in the end, my wedding was treated as something secondary, while that engagement party became, in their eyes, the event that could not be missed. I forced myself to smile, to keep my eyes shining for the photos, to pretend so no one but Daniel, my husband, could see how my heart was breaking. I didn't want to ruin his special day, the man who had loved me with a tenderness I had never known from my own family. But inside, the shock and humiliation kept rising in waves, and I had to bite down hard on my lips to keep from breaking into tears right there in front of the wedding altar. Every note of music, every congratulatory smile from colleagues reminded me that the very people who should have been there had chosen to leave me behind. If you were me, how would you feel? Would you keep smiling, or would you break down in tears at your own wedding? Before I continue the story of what happened next, tell me, where are you watching this from right now? If I had to capture my childhood in a single image, it would be Chloe sitting in the brightly lit living room while I lingered quietly in the hallway, clutching a book and listening to the sound of laughter spilling out. From the time we were little, my sister was always called the favorite, the pride and joy of the family. My parents never tried to hide their favoritism. Chloe was given the biggest room on the second floor, with a wide window that looked straight into the back garden, where the morning sunlight poured in like a painting. I, on the other hand, was placed in the narrow room next to the staircase, where every footstep passing by made the walls tremble. I never complained. I told myself I didn't need much space, that as long as I had a quiet corner to read, it was enough. But the truth was, every time I walked past Chloe's room and saw the shiny new decorations or the expensive dresses hanging in her closet, something inside me ached. When Chloe turned 16, my parents threw her a lavish birthday party, inviting nearly everyone from her school. Amid the cheers and the burst of confetti, they handed her the keys to a gleaming red car. I still remember that moment clearly, the whole family cheering, her friends gathering to take pictures, while I stood in the corner of the yard holding the small gift I had wrapped for her, a simple handmade bracelet I had spent days creating. Chloe took it, glanced at it briefly, and set it aside before turning back to admire her new car. My parents hugged her and posed for photos, while I disappeared from the frame, as if I had never been there at all. While Chloe was always given every privilege, I became the quiet shadow in the house. I excelled in school, always at the top of my class, but whenever I brought home my report card, my parents would only nod and say, "Yes, that's good," before turning back to ask Chloe if she needed money for a new dress or to join another club. I was never praised in public, never once saw a true look of pride directed at me. Even when I received a full scholarship to university, their response was simply, "That saves us some money, good for the family." I grew used to it, used to the feeling that I had to recognize my own worth because no one in my family would ever do it for me. I always held onto a fragile hope that someday there would be a moment when I would finally be placed first. My wedding, with the man I loved and had chosen as my partner in life, should have been that moment. I imagined my parents standing beside me, their eyes glowing with pride, holding my hands and telling me they were proud. I imagined Chloe smiling, finally stepping aside so I could have a day that was entirely mine. But what I received instead was nothing but disappointment. I remember so clearly when I sent out the invitations. I carefully wrote each line, chose the right paper, and mailed them to every relative. When I gave one to my parents, I waited for a warm response, a congratulatory message, or at least a hint of excitement. But my mother only replied with 3 dry words. "We'll see." Those 3 words weighed heavily on my heart. My father didn't even bother to write a sentence. He just sent a thumbs-up emoji, as if acknowledging a work meeting rather than his daughter's wedding. I stared at my phone screen for a long while, trying to comfort myself with the thought that they were busy, that their way of expressing feelings was stiff, but surely deep down they must have been happy for me. In the days leading up to the wedding, I found myself almost counting the hours, caught between excitement and dread. Everything was prepared with care, my wedding dress tailored just for me, the Boston Harbor venue reserved nearly a year in advance, and the guest list confirmed in full. Still, a faint unease lingered inside me, a quiet instinct that my family would find some excuse to stay away. Yet reason refused to let me believe it. I told myself, no matter what, they are my parents, my sister. There's no way they would skip their own daughter's wedding to attend something else. But one afternoon, before I could even rest after work, I called my mother to confirm. I remember her voice clearly on the other end of the line, calm, almost cold. "Olivia, you have to understand. Chloe needs the family more at her engagement party. Her in-laws are flying in from Europe. This is something we cannot miss." I froze, my ears ringing, my heart stopping for a few seconds. I laughed, thinking she must be joking, that maybe she was testing me somehow. But no, she was entirely serious. Her words landed with finality, leaving no room for hope. They had chosen Chloe. Once again, just as they had throughout my entire childhood, except this time, the cost was the most important day of my life. I held the phone with trembling hands, wanting to react, to scream, "What about me? This is my wedding day." But the words caught in my throat, each one strangled before it could escape. I was terrified that if Daniel found out, he would carry the pain for me, and our wedding would be clouded in sorrow. So I swallowed it all down, pretending that call never happened, forcing a smile when Daniel asked about my parents. I lied, saying they were busy preparing a gift, that they would be there. I couldn't bring myself to ruin our joy with such a cruel truth. And then there was Emily, my closest friend from college, the one who had promised to stand beside me as my bridesmaid, the one who cried tears of joy when I showed her the ring Daniel had given me. I believed Emily would never turn her back on me. But just a few days before the wedding, she called. Her voice was hesitant, but her words were clear. "Olivia, I'm sorry. I can't come to your wedding. Chloe's engagement party is really important. There will be a lot of my key business contacts there. I hope you can understand." I gripped the phone so tightly my nails dug into my skin. I asked again, unable to believe my own ears. "Contacts? More important than my wedding day, Emily?" She paused for a few seconds, then said, "I know you'll be upset, but I can't miss this opportunity. Please try to understand." I set the phone down, feeling hollow. The friend who had once shared every secret, every pain, every joy with me had finally chosen to walk away, all for personal gain. It felt as though the entire world was against me, as if I were just an expendable piece on a massive chessboard, pushed aside without a second thought. That evening, I sat alone in the living room, the warm yellow light spilling over the table where stacks of thank you cards were ready to be sent to guests. I stared at them, thinking about the people who would be there, colleagues, Daniel's friends, a handful of my own. But the faces that mattered most, my parents, my sister, my best friend, would be absent. The sting of betrayal from every direction cut like a blade twisting in my chest. I kept myself composed, swallowing back tears, but inside, I was breaking apart. I said nothing to Daniel. He deserved a wedding untainted by the cracks in my family. I forced myself to remain calm, to carry on as if I hadn't just been abandoned by the very people who should have stood closest to me. But deep inside, a coldness had begun to take root, spreading quietly like dying embers. I started to understand that blood ties do not always mean love. Sometimes, family is nothing more than a label, and beneath it lies favoritism, selfishness, and betrayal. And that was the state of mind I carried into my wedding day, a bride wearing a practiced smile while inside she bore wounds invisible to anyone but herself. My wedding took place at Boston Harbor on an unusually beautiful May morning, the sky clear and blue without a single cloud, the breeze carrying the soft scent of salt water across the lawn. The scene looked as though it had been arranged for a perfect celebration, rows of pristine white chairs lined up neatly on the grass by the harbor. Bouquets of white roses mixed with pale lavender swaying gently in the sunlight, and in the distance, the water glittered like glass under the sun. I wore a gown that brushed the ground with every step, a light veil drifting behind me as I walked. At the end of the aisle, Daniel waited, his eyes warm and steady, like an unspoken promise that no matter who abandoned me, he would remain. Friends, colleagues, and a few distant relatives arrived in full. Their smiles and heartfelt congratulations filled the air, giving the ceremony an atmosphere of warmth and joy. Some complimented my gown, others shook Daniel's hand and told him how lucky he was, while a few pulled me into tight embraces and whispered that I deserved to be happy. I smiled, I thanked them, I tried to immerse myself in that joy as though nothing was missing. But no matter how hard I tried, my eyes kept drifting toward the row reserved for my family, empty, silent, and impossible to ignore. I had once imagined the moment my father would take my hand and walk me down the aisle, my mother dabbing away tears as she watched her daughter become a bride, Chloe smiling brightly at my side, and Emily adjusting my veil before I stepped forward. But, in reality, those seats stood bare under the sun, empty and waiting for people who never came. My heart twisted painfully. I had tried to prepare myself, had told myself over and over that they wouldn't be there, but seeing the truth laid out in front of me was like a blade cutting deep. I smiled at Daniel when he looked my way, hiding the emptiness in my chest. When he leaned in and whispered, "Where are they?" I quietly answered, "Maybe they missed their flight," yet even as the words left my lips, I knew he already understood. Daniel didn't ask again. He only held my hand tighter, his eyes silently telling me that I didn't have to explain. The ceremony went smoothly, music filling the air, warm wishes rising all around us. I smiled, I hugged friends, I kissed Daniel as applause erupted. But deep inside, a corner of my heart was still bleeding. I was both a bride and, at the same time, a child abandoned in a crowded playground. When it came time for the reception, glasses were raised high, laughter rang out, and Daniel and I lifted our champagne flutes, touching them gently together in a moment meant to be perfect. It should have been complete, unbroken. But just then, my phone lit up in the pocket of my dress. I glanced at the screen, and my heart nearly stopped. A message from my mother appeared in bold letters. "We need to talk, immediately, on." I froze for a few seconds, my hand trembling so hard that the champagne in my glass rippled. Before I could react, the phone buzzed again, this time with a call. I declined it. But then another came through, and another, and another. Within the span of an hour, my phone lit up with 35 missed calls, all from my mother. I stared at that number, my mind blank. Could it be that they had realized their mistake and wanted to make it right now? Or was there some kind of emergency? But my instincts told me the reason had nothing to do with concern for me. Daniel noticed something was wrong. He set his glass down, leaned closer, and whispered, "What's going on, Olivia?" I shook my head, shoved my phone back into my pocket, and forced a smile so no one else would notice. I didn't want to stain my wedding day by mentioning the very people who had already chosen to abandon me. Yet every vibration of that phone in my pocket cut into me like a blade, reminding me that even as a bride, I was still only the second choice compared to Chloe in their eyes. I didn't pick up. I couldn't bear to hear another word that might shatter my heart in that moment. I just stood there silently, holding onto a smile that felt more fragile with every passing second, knowing deep inside that a storm was waiting for me beyond the veil of this ceremony. As I tried to cling to some sense of calm for my wedding day, the phone kept buzzing against my dress, stirring a gnawing unease in my chest. I hadn't answered, hadn't replied to my mother's messages, but then a few minutes later, the screen lit up again, this time with a new message from Amelia, my cousin, the only one in the extended family who still kept in touch and genuinely cared about me. Her words sent a chill through me. "You won't believe this, Olivia. They're talking bad about you at Chloe's party." I sank into the dressing room chair, my heart pounding. A rush of humiliation surged up inside me, sharp and searing, but more than anything, it was disbelief. On the very day of my wedding, while I stood in my gown, the people bound to me by blood were somewhere else, speaking of me with venom. Amelia went into more detail. When a few guests asked why my family wasn't at the wedding, my mother calmly replied that I had deliberately scheduled my wedding to fall on the same day as Chloe's engagement party, just to steal attention and overshadow my sister's special moment. I couldn't breathe, my hands shaking violently as I held the phone. My whole life, I had tried to avoid interfering with Chloe, even stepping back to give her the spotlight. And now, in front of so many people, my mother was spinning a false story, painting me as selfish and petty. And it didn't stop there. Amelia continued, telling me that my father coldly added that I had been distant from the family for years, so it was understandable that my parents and sister weren't at the wedding. My chest tightened. Distant? Was it because I had spent years pouring myself into studying, working, and standing on my own, just so I wouldn't become a burden? Or was it because I was never given any favoritism and had no choice but to create a world for myself outside of them? I had never chosen to walk away, it was their indifference that pushed me out. And now, my father twisted that reality into an excuse, using it to justify abandoning me on the most important day of my life. What cut me the deepest was Emily. The friend who had once known every little detail of my life had joined in on their act. Amelia texted that Emily told a group of guests I was too difficult about the guest list, that I had gotten upset when she wanted to bring extra business partners, and that, really, Olivia didn't even want me at the wedding. I felt numb reading those words. Emily had once held me while I cried over my unfair childhood, and now she was spreading lies that painted me as petty, as if I had driven my best friend away from the most important day of my life. Lies coming from the person I trusted most hurt more than 100 other wounds combined. And then came the breaking point, the rawest truth. Amelia's next message read, "Do you know why your mom is calling you nonstop? It's not to check in or because she cares. Chloe's party lost their catering contract at the last minute. They're panicking, and your mom told people you know some famous chefs in Boston. She wants you to call around and save the event." I nearly collapsed when I read that. While I stood there in my wedding dress, walking down the aisle without a single family member by my side, my mother wasn't regretful, wasn't even ashamed. She was only thinking about how to use my connections to salvage Chloe's engagement party. 35 missed calls weren't out of worry for her daughter on her wedding day, they were to recruit me as the backup plan. I set my phone down, my vision blurred with tears. But they weren't tears of weakness anymore, they were tears of a painful awakening. Everything I had suspected for years was finally confirmed. To my parents, I had never been a daughter to be cherished. I had only ever been a tool, a backup when they needed me. Even on my wedding day, they valued Chloe's reputation and the approval of her in-laws more than they valued my happiness. I sat in silence, my hands clenched so tightly they turned white. Every word from Amelia pierced my heart like a needle, yet at the same time, it cleared away the fog that had clouded me for so long. There was nothing left I could say to defend them. The slander, the lies, the cruelty of exploiting even my wedding day to serve Chloe, all of it painted a picture too sharp to ignore. This family had never stood by me, and perhaps they never would. When Daniel stepped into the room, I quickly wiped away my tears and forced a smile. He sat beside me, not pressing me with questions, only laying a gentle hand on my shoulder. In his eyes, I saw understanding. He knew something had happened, but he chose silence, giving me the space I needed. In that moment, I realized another truth. I already had a new family, beginning one built on respect and genuine love, not favoritism and deceit. I didn't pick up my mother's calls. I didn't want to explain, didn't want to justify. I let the calls fall into the void, a silent declaration that from this moment forward, I would no longer let them control my emotions. My wedding might have been without my parents, without my sister, without my best friend, but I still had Daniel. And I still had myself, stronger for every wound I had endured. From here, everything would change. I thought I had become strong enough to bear it all. My parents abandoning me on my wedding day, my best friend's betrayal, my family spreading lies about me at Chloe's engagement party. But only a few hours later, as I was struggling to steady my breath, Amelia sent me another message. This time, it wasn't just words, it was a photo. I opened it, and my heart dropped straight into a pit. On the screen, Chloe stood in the middle of her lavish party, a diamond and sapphire necklace glittering around her neck. I recognized it instantly. It was the $120,000 heirloom my grandmother had left to me in her will. The memory of my grandmother rushed back like a fierce wind. In the final years of her life, she lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, and I was the only one who visited her regularly. Chloe was always too busy with friends and parties, and my parents left everything to the nurses. But I, despite a demanding work schedule, made time to stop by every weekend. I brought her the pastries she loved, sat and talked with her, or simply held her hand so she wouldn't feel alone. She would often look at me with warm eyes and say I was her last source of comfort in this world. One time, when her health had grown weak, she called me to sit by her bed. Her voice was hoarse but firm. "Olivia, there is something I want you to keep. This isn't just jewelry, it is a symbol of love and respect. You deserve it, because you understand true value, spiritual worth, not vanity or rivalry. One day, when you wear it at your wedding, remember this. A marriage is built on love, not competition." Then she handed me a small velvet box, and inside was the necklace, glittering softly in the light. Tears filled my eyes as I promised her I would guard it as a treasure, not only for its price, but as proof of the bond between us. Yet, when she passed away, everything slipped from my hands. I clearly remember asking my mother about the necklace. She casually replied, "It's broken. The sapphire cracked. It's worthless now." I put it away. I believed her, though doubt lingered in my heart. Still, I didn't want to argue at the funeral or stir more conflict. I thought perhaps my grandmother had been confused, perhaps I had remembered wrong. I buried the memory, telling myself that what mattered most was the time I had with her, not a piece of jewelry. But now, in the photo Amelia sent, Chloe stood proudly wearing that very necklace, smiling radiantly under the glow of a chandelier. The sapphire shone a deep blue, catching the light and drawing every eye to her. I sat frozen, tears spilling before I could stop them. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the agony of seeing my grandmother's most sacred gift ripped from me and turned into a trophy for Chloe's vanity. I remembered every word my grandmother had spoken to me, the way she held my hand so tightly, her eyes stern yet overflowing with love. To her, the necklace was never meant to be flaunted at parties, but to remind me that true love is the foundation of marriage. And yet, instead of gracing my wedding day, it now sparkled around Chloe's neck at her extravagant engagement party. It felt like a double betrayal, stealing my heirloom and staining my grandmother's final wish. The grief swelled inside me until I could hardly breathe. I thought about how my mother had deceived me, hiding the necklace behind a carefully crafted lie. I thought about Chloe, who had always taken everything without effort, from the biggest bedroom to the shiny car, and now even the only spiritual inheritance my grandmother had entrusted to me. And I thought about myself, how many times I had chosen silence, stepped aside, made sacrifices, only to be disregarded again and again. The photo on my phone blurred as tears fell, my hand gripping it so tightly it hurt. In that moment, I realized I had not only lost the presence of my family at my wedding but also the most sacred piece of my grandmother's love. Once again, I had been pushed aside, stripped of what was mine, turned into an outsider. But buried beneath the pain, a small flame began to burn. I knew I could not let this end here. That necklace belonged to me not only because the will said so, but because my grandmother had trusted me with it, placing it in my hands with her heart. More than anything, I could not let her memory be reduced to a shallow display of vanity. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and in that instant, a quiet resolve formed within me. One day, I would take back what was mine. Not for money, not for recognition, but for love and for her words. And if they thought they could strip it from me without consequence, they were wrong. I would remain silent, I would wait, but when the time was right, the truth would be laid bare. I knew all too well that if I reacted in the moment, they would twist everything back on me, just as they always had. In their eyes, I would only be Olivia making a fuss. Olivia being selfish, Olivia refusing to compromise. And once again, I would become the shadow, easily drowned out by the smooth justifications of my parents and Chloe. No, I would not let that script repeat itself ever again. On my wedding night, while Daniel slept soundly after the long day, I sat in front of my laptop, the cold blue glow of the screen washing over my tired face. I picked up my phone and began screenshotting every message, every voicemail, every photo Amelia had sent me. I saved the text from my mother, "We need to talk." Immediately, along with the 35 missed calls. I captured Amelia's words about what was said at Chloe's party, Emily's gossip about the guest list, and my parents' lies about me stealing the spotlight. And I saved the photo of Chloe wearing the necklace, zooming in on every detail so no one could deny it. Each click cut into me like another knife, but I kept going, steady and patient, because I knew these would be my evidence someday. I created a new folder on my laptop and named it simply, "For Later." To anyone else, it might sound like a joke, but for me, it was a vow. I would not use it now. I would not rush into confrontation. But the time would come when later would become now. I organized everything by date, labeled every file, even built a small table of notes to track what each piece showed. This was no longer just an emotional reaction, it was the start of a plan. If they wanted to make me the outsider, then I would let my silence be the weapon that, one day, made the truth undeniable. When I finished saving everything, I reopened the scanned copy of my grandmother's will. I had kept the file tucked away in my email for years, never daring to look at it after the funeral. But now the words on the page glowed clearly before me. The diamond sapphire necklace shall belong to my granddaughter, Olivia Carter. It is to be given to Olivia only on her wedding day, as a reminder that love is the most important foundation of marriage. I read the sentence over and over, feeling as though she were whispering it into my ear. That confirmation filled me with both grief and strength. There was no doubt anymore. The necklace was mine not only legally, but spiritually, emotionally, and by the bond of love she and I had shared. I closed my eyes and imagined what would happen if I confronted them now. My mother would scoff and call me delusional. My father would accuse me of tearing the family apart. Chloe would feign surprise and turn it back on me as jealousy, and Emily would probably sigh and tell me to just let it go for your own peace. The only outcome would be yet another round of humiliation. I had learned a bitter lesson. In this game, if I wanted to win, I had to be patient. I had to prepare everything so thoroughly that when the truth finally came to light, there would be no room left for denial. I gently closed the laptop and looked at Daniel sleeping peacefully beside me. My heart softened. He had no idea what was happening, and I didn't want him to not yet. I wanted him to savor the happiness of our wedding day without being dragged into the toxic storm of my family. So I chose silence, wrapping all the hurt tightly inside me, saving it for another day. A day when I would be strong enough not only to protect myself but to lay bare everything they had tried so carefully to hide. I made a promise to myself. From this moment on, I would live as if I never expected anything from them again. I would pour my energy into building my own life, nurturing my love with Daniel, advancing my career, and step by step claiming my own place in the world. I would not argue, I would not beg, I would not cry. I would let silence be my weapon, let time gather my strength. And when the moment was right, the truth would roar on its own, tearing apart the glittering mask they had so carefully placed on Chloe. After the wedding, I stepped into an entirely new chapter of my life. The pain of being abandoned by my family on such an important day still lingered, but instead of letting it drown me, I chose to turn it into fuel. I poured all of myself into my work at the tech company where I had built my career. The long nights no longer left me drained the way they once did, because now I knew exactly what I was fighting for, to prove that even without my family's approval, I could carve out a place of my own through talent and perseverance. The projects I managed gradually became some of the company's most crucial ventures. I led my team through wave after wave of challenges, from launching new products to negotiating international contracts. Each success felt like stitching up an old wound, piece by piece. Not long after, I was promoted to senior manager. The day the decision was announced, my colleagues clapped, my boss shook my hand, and he said, "Olivia, you are the definition of resilience." I smiled, but inside, I whispered, if only my grandmother were still alive to see this. Work wasn't the only thing I rebuilt. With my savings, performance bonuses, and a small loan, I began investing in real estate in Cambridge. After months of searching, I purchased a stunning apartment overlooking the Charles River. Every morning, standing at the window watching the sunlight dance on the water, I felt my spirit being renewed. That apartment was more than just a place to live, it was a symbol of independence, something I had chosen and created for myself, something no one could ever take away. Daniel, too, thrived in his career. As a talented architect, he quickly earned recognition from high-profile clients. Together, we began attending charity galas and community events where the city's entrepreneurs, scholars, and artists gathered. At first, I felt hesitant, afraid I didn't belong. But soon I realized that in these circles, value wasn't measured by blood ties or family name, it came from what you contributed and how you lived. Daniel and I were welcomed warmly, because people could see the sincerity and the effort we carried with us. We also began raising funds for children in difficult circumstances. Daniel redesigned a community center, and I secured sponsorships from partners in the tech industry. When the project was completed, several local newspapers covered it. Our names gradually started to appear in conversations among Boston's small circle of elites, and for the first time in my life, I no longer felt like a shadow. I had a place of my own, one that no one had handed to me and no one could deny. Time passed, and the wound from my wedding day slowly scarred over, though it never disappeared completely. I no longer felt the kind of breathless pain when I thought about my family, but the bitterness remained, like embers beneath a layer of ash. I learned to be quiet, to smile, and to build new influence through relationships and through the respect the community gave me. With each step forward, I believed more strongly that I had been right not to react impulsively, right to choose patience. Then one evening, as Daniel and I were returning from a fundraising event, I received a message from Amelia. She was still the only one in the extended family who kept in touch with me, quietly sharing what was happening on the other side. The message was brief, but it made my hands sweat as I gripped the phone. "Chloe is getting married in New York. The necklace will be worn again." I sat still, my heart pounding. All the years of being left behind, dismissed, and robbed of my grandmother's keepsake condensed into a single resolve. The truth had to come to light. And this time, I would not act on raw emotion. I would prepare carefully, step by step, so that the blow I returned would land with a weight they could not recover from. Chloe chose the Plaza Hotel, one of New York's most lavish and storied venues, for her wedding. That didn't surprise me. Chloe had been accustomed to grandeur since childhood, loved to flaunt it, and my parents always indulged her every whim. The media began covering the event weeks in advance, describing it as a society affair, drawing notable names from both sides of the Atlantic. Her in-laws were European, well known in the finance world, and Chloe was eager to turn her wedding day into a stage for displaying status. I sat in my apartment by the Charles River, carefully opened my laptop, and began executing the plan. I contacted Vincent Harper, a renowned Boston attorney who specializes in inheritance disputes. Vincent had helped many prominent families navigate crises, and I knew he was the one who could turn my plan into reality. After hearing me out, Vincent paused, then smiled. Olivia, you have enough evidence. Legally, this is straightforward, but the social impact will be significant. If you truly want to see it through, I'm ready to stand with you. We went to work immediately. Vincent drafted a legal notice, citing the specific clause in my grandmother's will. The diamond and sapphire necklace valued at $120,000 was to be given to me on my wedding day. He attached the scanned will and the photo of the necklace around Chloe's neck at her engagement party. In the notice, Vincent demanded that my family immediately return the inherited property or face a lawsuit for misappropriation and wrongful use. He also included a legal warning. If the necklace appeared at Chloe's wedding, it would serve as public evidence of a will violation, and litigation would commence at once. I asked Vincent to have the notice delivered at the peak of the ceremony, 3:15 p.m., when guests would be seated and the press and photographers in place. I wanted that document to land in Chloe's and my parents' hands at the very height of their manufactured glow, so that the brilliant lights would instantly turn into the shadow of shame. At the same time, I knew that public opinion was power. I reached out to a society journalist I had met through charity events, someone with a sharp instinct for stories involving the elite. I didn't reveal everything, only just enough. There's an inheritance dispute connected to Chloe Carter's upcoming wedding. Legal documents will surface on that day. The journalist immediately perked up, took note, and promised to follow closely. I didn't need to say more. A single whisper of rumor was enough to turn curious eyes toward the Plaza Hotel. In the days leading up to the wedding, I felt as though I were climbing a mountain. Each step of preparation, every email exchanged with Vincent, every brief message from Amelia, all brought me closer to the summit where the truth would finally be revealed. On the eve of Chloe's wedding, I sat alone, watching the city lights shimmer across the river. I thought of my grandmother. If she were alive, she would surely tell me not to let hatred consume me. But I believed this wasn't about revenge. It was about preserving the truth, about making sure her honor was never twisted into a spectacle of vanity. And then, the day arrived. News of Chloe's wedding flooded social media. Photos of luxury cars lined up outside the Plaza Hotel, celebrities stepping out in glittering gowns and tuxedos. Inside, Chloe wore a gown that trailed for meters, and around her neck gleamed the necklace that should have been mine. The entire room gasped at her splendor. But I knew that moment had only minutes left before everything unraveled. At exactly 3:15 p.m., Vincent sent the legal notice. The email went directly to Chloe, my parents, and the Plaza Hotel's management. Within seconds, their phones buzzed nonstop. Inside the ballroom, the once buoyant atmosphere faltered as whispers spread and screens were passed from hand to hand. Chloe's brow furrowed, my parents looked flustered, and the organizers huddled anxiously in a corner. Vincent followed through exactly as promised. Just minutes after the notice was sent, he arrived at the Plaza Hotel in person, carrying a printed copy with a red seal and signed verification. His presence alone forced both the organizers and the hotel management to take the matter seriously. The wedding planner, whose job was to ensure everything ran smoothly, was immediately pulled into tense discussions. And then, in that glittering ballroom filled with crystal chandeliers and the strains of classical music, the unthinkable happened. Chloe was ordered to remove the diamond and sapphire necklace in the middle of her own wedding. I could picture the moment clearly, hundreds of eyes fixed on the bride, confused and buzzing. The planner leaned in to whisper, followed by a hotel staff member with a grave expression, holding the legal notice in his hand. Chloe tried to force a smile, but her face quickly drained of color. My mother panicked, while my father argued furiously with Vincent, but it was pointless. Vincent was not a man easily drowned out. Calmly, he reiterated the legal consequences if the necklace continued to be displayed. Under pressure both from the hotel, fearful of a lawsuit, and from the media, already stirring to report the disruption, Chloe had no choice but to unfasten the necklace. I watched my phone screen flashing, knowing for certain my mother wouldn't leave me alone after Chloe had been forced to remove the necklace. I picked up, steadying my voice. Olivia. My mother's shrill voice cut through the noise of the wedding hall. Do you have any idea what you've just done? You ruined your sister's wedding. Hundreds of guests are whispering, the press is circling, and you've turned everything into a spectacle. Oh. I bit my lip, but this time I refused to swallow the bitterness. No, Mother. You and Chloe are the ones who turned it into a spectacle. This was her wedding day, meant to be about love and happiness. Instead of letting it shine, you paraded her out wearing something that never belonged to her, the heirloom grandma left to me. Do you think the guests will remember Chloe walking down the aisle, or will they only remember the moment the bride was forced to take off her necklace under the camera flashes? Her voice faltered. You're always attacking your sister. This is her day. Couldn't you let her have it, just this once? A laugh escaped me, dry and sharp. Let her have it? Do you even remember my wedding? Oh, that's right, you weren't there. You were all too busy at Chloe's engagement party. I walked down the aisle alone, managed everything myself, even my dress. Meanwhile today, Chloe had an entire team of planners, your arms around her, and even Grandma's heirloom until the truth surfaced. And still, you say I haven't given enough? On the other end, silence fell, broken only by her ragged breathing. I continued, my voice firm. You can choose favoritism, you can choose to protect Chloe all your life. But I will not be silent anymore. If weddings are supposed to mark something important, then remember this, you've turned today into the ending of my silence. I hung up, letting the line go dead. For the first time, I felt I had taken back the voice that had been stolen from me for so long. And just a few hours later, the press exploded. Photos of the bride walking down the aisle with a bare neck spread rapidly across social media. Headlines screamed, "Heirloom, worth $120,000, belongs to bride's sister, not the bride." The public began buzzing with speculation. Some wondered why the Carter family had allowed such a dispute to erupt in the middle of one of the most extravagant weddings of the year. Others whispered about the fractured relationship between the two sisters. Most importantly, the gaze of both the media and high society shifted instantly from admiration for Chloe to suspicion and disdain. The fallout was faster than I expected. My family's reputation collapsed overnight. Chloe, once coddled and paraded as the perfect princess, suddenly became a symbol of greed and pretense. Her new in-laws, a European family known for valuing honor, grew cold. Amelia later told me that after the wedding, Chloe's husband had a heated confrontation with my parents, accusing them of hiding the truth. My mother was left humiliated, my father seethed but could do nothing to repair the damage. And Emily, who had once spread lies about me, suffered her own consequences. Her professional circle began to distance themselves, unwilling to associate with someone tied to the Carter scandal. As for me, I did nothing. I didn't post a single status. I didn't respond to a single message from them. I maintained absolute silence, and that silence carried more weight than any argument ever could. It deepened the curiosity of the public and magnified my family's discomfort. While they scrambled to contain the storm of gossip, I simply lived my life pouring myself into work, into Daniel, into charity projects. I learned then that sometimes the most powerful form of revenge is not raising your voice at all, but letting the truth speak for itself. As time passed, the public chatter faded, but the stain on my family never washed away. A year later, on our wedding anniversary, Daniel surprised me with a familiar velvet box. When I opened it, my eyes welled with tears. The diamond and sapphire necklace had finally returned to its rightful place. After the incident at the Plaza Hotel, under Vincent's legal pressure and the looming threat of a lawsuit, my parents had been forced to hand it back. Daniel had quietly kept it, waiting until our anniversary so he could clasp it around my neck himself. In the soft glow of candlelight during our simple dinner for two, Daniel stepped behind me and fastened the delicate clasp. I lowered my head slightly, feeling the cool weight of the necklace rest against my skin, and a strange wave of emotion rushed through me. It wasn't triumph, it was peace. I whispered, "Now it's back where it belongs." Daniel smiled, pressed a gentle kiss to my shoulder, as if to remind me that every hardship I had endured had led to this moment, the moment I held love, respect, and justice in my hands. I sat there for a long while, fingertips brushing the sapphire's shimmer, and realized the necklace was more than property. It was memory, a reminder of the only pure love I had ever known from my grandmother. It had returned to me not as a prize from revenge, but as proof that patience and silence can hold more power than anger ever could. And so, I closed the door on my family. Not out of hatred, but because I chose freedom and peace. I knew I would never again look to them for love, nor allow them to wound me a second time. I had Daniel, my career, my standing in the community, and most importantly, I had myself strong, confident, and free. That day, when I looked in the mirror and saw myself wearing my grandmother's necklace, I smiled. It was no longer the forced smile I wore on my wedding day, but a genuine one. A new chapter had begun, one where I was no longer anyone's shadow, but fully, unapologetically myself, Olivia Carter.